everyone, Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore here, and welcome to the MuseScore Café. So this is my regular series on Wednesdays where we talk about some aspect of using MuseScore, making music using MuseScore. And today, well, we usually have a particular theme that we talk about, a particular aspect of using MuseScore, and today's theme is going to be, I'm going to be working on the Community Canon project. That's the final project from the Basic Music Theory course. And yeah, we're going to mostly talk about MuseScore stuff. It's entirely possible some theory things will be coming up. I'm sure they will. They can't not. But what's going on is I've got, a dozen or more submissions from people that have these different melodic snippets, different little two-measure phrases in everyone's different scores. My task is going to be to kind of combine these into one score. And so I'm going to talk about some of the issues that come up in doing that, copying and pasting from one score to another, from one place in a score to another, because this is a canon, and just all the different MuseScore issues that are going to come up, maybe how to set up this score also. So we'll just see what happens and walk through the process as I go along. So that is the plan. So good to see everyone checking in and where people are coming from. So let's go ahead and do this. So I've got all the submissions but one loaded. So I was still having trouble. One of the submissions download is disabled for. And so one of the things, actually the first thing that I want to show you is if you're having trouble with getting your score to be downloadable. This is a MuseScore.com thing, and I'm not an expert on MuseScore.com, but let's start off with this. So Graham, I don't know if you are here or not. If you are here, know that yours is the one score that I'm not able to download right now. And so for this one, if we're not able to get that fixed, that's fine. I can just type in the necessary bits of melody that I need. It's short enough. I don't mind doing this. But let's go ahead and make sure that we all know how to make our own scores downloadable if necessary. So I'm going to go to MuseScore.com and I'm going to go ahead and grab one of my own scores. So I click on my profile icon here and go to My Scores. And I'm going to one of my scores because to do what we need to do, it's got to be one of your own scores. I can't edit other people's. So I'm going to take my hot cross buns that I uploaded a little while ago. And what I'm going to do is be viewing my own score here. And now click the ... menu at the top right. And then you'll see update this score. And when I do this, first thing we want to make sure is that it is public. If it's not public, if you make it instead unlisted, we can work with that, and I'll show you that as well. If you make it private, I'm not going to be able to see it at all. If you do it unlisted, I'll be able to see it, but you're going to have to work a little harder. So let's just make these things public here. Makes life a little easier. And then down at the bottom, you'll see disable the score download. A checkbox here. You want it unchecked. You don't want to have that option checked. If it's checked, people won't be able to download. Now, I understand that sometimes that checkbox doesn't appear, and that's probably part of the problem. And I don't know what's going on, if it has to do with what kind of account you have on MuseScore.com or what the copyright status of the score is. I really don't know that kind of stuff. But if I ever tell you I can't download it, that's what you need to do. You need to make sure that that checkbox is unchecked, and if it's not showing up at all for you, that's something to, I guess, contact MuseScore.com support about. Support@MuseScore.com and ask why you can't see the disable score download button. And I would love to know why sometimes that happens. So anyhow, that's the first thing that I wanted to make sure that I covered, is just how to make sure your scores are downloadable, because that does come up from time to time. All right, what I want to do now is I am going to create a new score to use to kind of copy everyone's stuff into. So I'm going to create now the score that I'm going to use. So I'm going to hit Control-N to create the score. And what I'm going to do is set it up just like the original, Pachelbel canon was set up, it's going to be 3 violins and a cello. So under choose instruments, I'm going to say strings bowed and go violin, 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 cello. Okay. So got that going, and now I'm going to resist the urge to just hit the done button like I usually do. So yeah, Graham, if you want to see if you can make that downloadable, that's great. But if you're one of the people for whom that disable download button doesn't even show up, then I don't know what to say other than I wish I knew. So anyhow, I'm gonna resist the urge to just hit done like I usually do, but I'm gonna go ahead and hit next and go ahead and fill out this information. So I'll say it's in D major. The time signature is 4/4. Now, in the original canon, I want to say that maybe it was written with a C for common time, but I don't like that. I'm just not a fan of the common time symbol, so I'm just going to leave it as 4/4. But if you do want to use the common time symbol, it's right here, right? So you'd click the 4/4 and just tell it common time. It's the same thing. It's just a different way of notating it. Tempo. All right. 120 is going to be way too fast, right? Because we're eventually going to get these 30-second notes in here. So I will click the tempo marking, say that I want to show one. And what I've discovered is that 42, other than being the answer to life, the universe, and everything, as Douglas Adams fans would all know, it also happens to be a tempo that sounds pretty good for this score. It's slow. It's really slow. It's the way most people play the score these days. I have a feeling it wasn't originally meant to be quite that slow. Now, number of measures. I don't know how long the thing's going to be. I'm just going to put in 100 for now. And I can always, as it says, you can always add and delete measures later, so it doesn't matter that much. There is not a pickup in this piece, so I don't need to worry about that. All right. The reason I really wanted to go to this dialogue, because I so often don't show you this dialogue because I'm in such a hurry to demonstrate other stuff. But in this dialogue, if you enter the title here, so I'm going to call this Community Canon. Composer, members of Mastering MuseScore Community. I can always change this later. But the point is, by putting information in here now, it makes sure that it is recorded in the score metadata. So when you later export it to PDF or export it to an MP3 file, the information that's entered here gets recorded along with the score, which is so it'll be there in the PDF, not necessarily printing. It'll print where it's supposed to print, but it also gets reported in the metadata so that when websites want to display this stuff, they can show it. So anyhow, when possible, I like to put in the information in here so that it makes it into the metadata, but I'll make sure I show you how to do that after I'm finished with this. So subtitle, yeah, maybe there'll be a subtitle. I don't know. I'm going to leave that blank. But the other little trick is, notice how the default text there says subtitle. I don't really want to see that, so I'm going to press a space and then delete it. So now I'm not going to see my subtitle. And then copyright info, yeah. I guess we haven't talked about the copyright status of this thing, but we're all contributing to it. Hopefully everyone's okay with the fact that I'm using it, and we're going to post this publicly, so we'll figure that out. Yeah, cut time. I absolutely agree with you there about the cut time. I don't care for the C for common time, but the cut time is absolutely a thing. All right, so I'm going to leave the copyright blank, and we'll fill that in later. So it's creating the score now. The score is all nice and set up. Now, if you then do decide you want to put in a copyright message, or otherwise change that metadata, you go to File, Project Properties, and here's where all that information is. So if I decide I want to change the composer info, actually I think subtitle isn't even part of this, but copyright definitely is. So anything I enter in the copyright here will appear on the score and also in the metadata. Graham, I see you've given me a nice little link here. I'm going to hit the download button. Download was not disabled. See, I get this, and I don't know why. So I'm not sure why that is the case, and that seems like something is okay. No, but here's the other thing. No, if your score was unlisted, I wouldn't even be able to see it. So I'm still quite confused, to be honest, Graham. I really just don't know. If, by the way, you ever do want to share an unlisted score, you'll click the share button here, and then let me just move this back. Then you would want to hit that share button and then secret link, and then you'd make sure you copy that secret link. So if you ever want to share an unlisted score with someone, you can use that secret link. That's the extra step I mentioned. But that shouldn't be relevant, because if you don't share the secret link, I won't be able to see it at all. So at least I shouldn't be able to be seeing it at all. But maybe that's the thing. Maybe secrets, maybe unlisted scores aren't downloadable. That could be. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe unlisted scores aren't downloadable. That would be new information to me. But, you know, and I can tell this is the secret link because you've got that S there. That's the secret part, I think. So maybe that's the deal. So, yeah, maybe if you change it to public, it'll be downloadable, and then you could change it back to unlisted. Don't know. But that's all good information for us to, you know, I would love to know the answer to that, because it's been bugging us for the last year or so. All right, so now I've got my score set up. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to get that bass line in there, because we're all going to use that same bass line. And at this point, I know what it is. I'm just going to type it. So N for note input mode, 5. For some reason, my keyboard display thing isn't working today, and I have no idea why, but I'm just going to announce what I'm doing as I do it. So N for note input, 5 for quarter note, and then I'm just going to type D, and then A, B, F sharp. Let me turn my volume back up. G, and then G, A. I believe that is the correct bass line. Let's flip over to one of the actual submissions and make sure. That is our bass line. So here's the first little trick that you might want to know if you don't already. Many of you have seen me use this before, but you know, not everyone sees everything. So I've entered those two measures. Before I do what I'm about to do, I want to make a choice. I want to decide, am I going to try to enter the Roman numerals on this, or chord symbols, or anything like that? And no, I don't want to do that. I don't feel like in the finished piece it's going to be useful to see those Roman numerals over and over again. If I change my mind later, I'll deal with it. But what I want to do is get this looking the way I want it, because now I'm about to I'm about to make copies of this, a whole bunch of copies of it. So I'm going to select those two measures, click one measure, shift click the next, and then press R. And then I'm just going to press and hold R to fill up my entire score with copies of that thing. I'm just holding R right now, and you can see it filled up that entire cello part with that bass line. So by getting those first two measures the way I wanted, then I was just able to copy them. So if I had wanted the Roman numeral analysis, I would have entered it. Now, the thing is, if I do choose to put Roman numeral analysis in, I don't want it all through the score. So let's do this. Let's put it at the beginning. So looks like you've got it here again. So let me actually just try going back to the score. It's the same score. Here it is with the secret link, and I want to see if just trying to download it now works any differently from the secret link, and it does. So yeah, that does seem to be the ticket. That does seem to be the ticket. Secret scores are not downloadable. This is interesting. I had no idea that was the case, but I think it now finally explains something that's been sort of bothering me for a while. So I'm happy to have figured that out. So here we go. I've got your score here. Let's go to the folder, and it goes into my Mastering MuseScore folder. I've got a community subfolder, and then a project just for this. And then I'm putting people's names at the beginning to make it easier for me to find them. All right. So now I finally have your score. Very happy about that. Let me go ahead and open it also. So, yes, I'm going to go ahead and put in the Roman numerals, if for no other reason than to make sure you all see how to do that and to see a setting that I'm going to make to help them align better. Because by default, you're going to see that they're not aligned very well. And at this point, I've got like a whole bunch of scores open and I'm doing my live stream. So you'll see that opening new scores is slow. But I'm going to go ahead and enter some Roman numerals in here. And so I'm going to go, I've clicked that first note, and now I'm going to go to add text. Oh, here finally comes Graham's score. Yeah, that's crazy slow. But yeah, that's what happens when you're doing live streams. All right, so add, come on. I think while the score is still low, okay, your score is up now. Good. All right. So again, let me redo this here. I'm going to come on. Oh, actually, the first thing I'm going to do is as soon as I get control back in this window here, because it is kind of freezing on me a little here. I want to save this thing. I don't want to make the mistake of working on this for a while, forgetting to save it, and then have a crash or something happen. So unfortunately, it seems like it's already acting funny. It's already kind of locking up. Are my other windows locked up too? Now that's not a good sign at all. Oh, no, that one is working. Oh, now it's finally good. Okay. So there's my D. I'm going to go ahead and save the score now. So Control S, save, and let's put it in an appropriate folder, not my templates folder, but my scores. And so this is a big thing that it's funny. This never used to be an issue. But over the last couple years, it becomes an issue more and more often. I think, frankly, as more younger people start using MuseScore, who mostly have mobile experience with phones and tablets and not so much with computers. What happens is people don't realize you have to save things. I mean, that sounds kind of funny if you're an old time computer user, of course you save things, right? But think about that on your phone. There's never a save button. No apps have save buttons. They just save stuff. That's just how apps work on your phones and tablets. So people who kind of grew up on that forget to save. And then they might work on a score for hours, literally never having saved it, and then wonder, well, why can't I find my score? So unfortunately, that is a thing. So I'm going to go ahead and save this score. And it is called Community Canon. There we go. So what I want to do next is add Roman numeral analysis. So I've selected that first note, and I'm going to go to Add Text and Roman numeral analysis. And you'll see that I've defined a shortcut, Control-Shift-R. So when I do this, I now get a cursor where I can type, and I can type in 1, 5, 6, 3, 4, 1, 4, 5, and then stop there because it's going to be the same thing over and over again. So I mentioned the keyboard shortcut, and indeed, if I click another note and then use that shortcut, which I've already forgotten what it was, Control-Shift-R, yes, Control-Shift-R. Again, many of you have seen this before, but it's such a good thing to know how to do. I'm going to show again. Edit, Preferences, and in the Preferences dialog, Shortcuts, you can search for a shortcut here. I can type Roman, and you'll see there's the shortcut there. If you want to define your own shortcut for it, like I have, you would select it and then click Define, and then just type what you want. If you, instead of Control-Shift-R, you want Control-Alt-R, there you go, or whatever else you want it to be. It just has to be something you're not already using for something else. So I don't want to change that because I think I chose that. I try to avoid Alt in my shortcuts because on Linux, Alt typically does other things, and so I try not to overuse Alt, even though it's tempting because it's available in MuseScore, but Alt is used for a bunch of other things on my Linux system. All right, so that's how you enter the Roman numerals. And so I just typed and then pressed space to move on to the next note, just like with chord symbols. Notice, though, they're not perfectly aligned. They're all aligned except for that one. This one here is lower because of the note on ledger lines. Now, MuseScore has aligned everything else, but not the one. And that's because the default position of these is like, 3 spaces below the staff, and that's fine most of the time. But MuseScore is capable of looking and saying, hey, that one Roman numeral is lower than the rest. Let's align everything else to that. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to go to Format, Style, and then Chord Symbols. And here you'll see settings that say maximum shift above, maximum shift below. This is basically telling MuseScore, go ahead and align things, but don't try too hard. Like right now, it's trying 0 hard. If I put in a value of, say, 100 in there, then it will always align things, but that it's going to align things. Well, let me do it just so you can see what happens. I'm going to put in a crazy high number. I'll put in 100. Oh, it doesn't even let me put in 100. It's too crazy high. I'll put in 20. Watch what happens. They're aligned now, and if I keep moving this D further down, notice it's still keeping them aligned, but at some point, this looks stupid, right? I don't need to have all of these aligned just because one note was way below the staff, right? So normally what I do is instead of setting it to a really big number that tells MuseScore, yeah, you keep trying, you'll move these chords, move those Roman numerals up to 20 spaces away. Instead of that, I'm going to go to Format, Style, Chord Symbols again, get back where I was there, and instead of a value of 20, I find somewhere around 5 works better. That's maximum shift below. That's for the Roman numerals below the staff. I'm going to do the same thing for maximum shift above in case I decide to enter chord symbols above the staff. So notice now it is not aligning these because it says, you know what, that's too much. I'm only going to move these Roman numerals if I can get it to be aligned within 5 spaces. Does that make sense? So watch what happens now as I move this note back up. Now it's, that's 5 spaces. So it'll align them if it can do it only that. And even that's too much. Actually, I think I usually just use 3, but whatever. This will make them align. So let me just change that note back to a D, and they will be aligned. So that's something else to know in MuseScore. So now let's actually get on with the business of actually copying, pasting people's stuff. But before I do that, there's something else I want to do. These melodies are all 2-measure segments. And the thing is that the quarter note melodies, we could possibly fit, like, let's flip over to someone's melody. Let's look at, well, Graham's is right up here. The quarter note melody, we could clearly fit 4 measures of quarter notes in a single system. We could even fit 4 measures of 8th notes in a single system. 4 measures of 16th notes in a single system, that's probably not really viable. So I'm not going to want as many. What I want to do is I want to just make this really easy for me to manage the copying and pasting and keeping track of where I'm at. So what I think I really want is to put in system breaks every 2 measures. So that way, every system, every line of music is one little snippet. So I want to put in system breaks every 2 measures. Well, MuseScore's got a command to do this for you. So you don't have to, like, if I wanted to like hit this and then hit enter, that will add that line break for me. But I want to have MuseScore like just put in line breaks every 2 measures. So I'm going to start with nothing selected, because when you do that, it'll affect the whole score. Otherwise, it'll just affect, like if I select a region like this, what I'm about to do would only affect that region there. So I'm going to have nothing selected, and now go to Tools, or is it Tools or is it Format? It's Format. Format, Add Remove System Breaks. And now I'm going to tell it to break systems every 4 is the sort of default value filled in, but I'm going to change it to 2 and say, okay. And now I've got system breaks every 2 measures. So now I'm in like good position to start copying and pasting, right? So what I want to do next is like, I've looked at people's melodies and talked about them in the music masterclass, but I haven't worked out exactly how I'm going to put this thing together. So I'm going to show some techniques here, and then we'll go from there. So I'm looking at Graham's, and so what I know about what I'm going to end up with is I want it to be similar to Pachelbel's actual canon, which starts off with quarter notes and then moves to eighths and then moves to sixteenths and then moves to more complicated rhythms. And then it varies from there. So I want to start off with a quarter note melody. And I would love to start with a quarter note melody that I think is going to be especially strong, and also one that I think can be harmonized well. So this is now where I'm getting into some theory stuff. So without going too deep into the theory stuff, what I will say is Graham's melody has a wonderful quality to it here, in which it is mostly stepwise, and it is not Pachelbel's melody, right? A lot of people had melodies that were very similar to Pachelbel's melody. So Graham's melody starts off different. It starts off with an ascending quarter note line. Now the second measure here is Pachelbel's melody, because the original one was F sharp, E, D, C sharp, then B, A, B, C sharp, right? So the second measure is the same as Pachelbel's, but whatever. There's only so many good quarter note melodies. But this is a really strong melody, so I'm not guaranteeing this is going to be the one I end up with, but it's going to be what I'm going to use right now. So I'm going to select those 2 measures. I clicked one measure, and then I think what I actually don't even remember. Did I shift click the other? That's one way to select. The other way is to shift control right. That will extend the selection 1 measure at a time. Shift control right. Every time I press shift control right, extends the selection 1 measure. Shift control left decreases the selection a measure at a time. So, or, anytime I say control, Mac people substitute command. So now I will control C, and now I'm going to come back over to my score and go into the violin 1 part, because that's where it's going to go, and paste it. Control V. So I've now started my canon. Now, what I want to do next is, I think for playback purposes, like if I try to play this right now, hear how it like takes a second to start up? MuseSound starts up pretty quick, but you do miss like the beginning there, and this is gonna bug me. If I'm like listening to this in little snippets, it's gonna bug me that it always takes a little while to get started. So I think I'm gonna switch away from MuseSounds for a minute. I'm also gonna say, let's listen to this actually. Let's go ahead and listen to it, and then I wanna make an observation, and Dave, this is for you. Notice that time it did start up. So MuseSounds takes a minute to get started, but then it's okay. But then you start a new location and it takes a second again. So it's got that little bit of portamento in there that would be great if this was Ravel. It's not Ravel. It's not even Pachelbel, but it's in Pachelbel style. That sort of expression is just not appropriate. So if you wanted to keep MuseSounds but not have that going on, you would open the mixer, and then instead of using violin 1, you would want to change that in MuseSounds to violin 2. By changing it to violin 2, and then also you'll see that the violin 2 part is already using that. There's only 2 violin sounds in MuseSounds, and it has nothing to do or little to do with actual first and second parts in an ensemble. It's just 2 different violins. think of it, it would have been better to call it romantic violin and classical violin or Baroque violin. But in any case, I want to use Baroque violin or MuseScore 2. And Dave, yes, absolutely, you can put an empty bar in before the start. But the problem is I'm going to be starting all sorts of random places within the score also. And then, yeah, I could start a measure ahead of time. I could totally do that. But I just want to show people how to make the quick switch also. So what I'm doing right now is switching to everyone to violin 2. So violin 2, violin 2, violin 2. And now when I play this guy, the portamento is gone, right? Now it's more Baroque sounding, less romantic sounding. So you can totally do that, and I'm going to do that. But for now, I really don't want it's going to be simpler to work with right now if I just flip to the old-fashioned sound font sounds. So I could do that individually, one track at a time, but you can do that for the whole score by going to View and then Playback Setup. When you do that, you can just switch between Muse Sounds for everything and MuseScore Basic for everything. If you pick Muse Sounds, which is the default normally, it'll use it wherever it can and fall back to MuseScore Basic where where it can't. But if I choose MuseScore Basic, it'll switch everything to MuseScore Basic. And I'm not going to change the default. I'm just going to say activate this profile. It's a little silly that you have to actually press that button, but you do. And then you press OK. So what I find with the startup is if the first time you try to start from a given selection, it'll take a moment for all the voices to kind of come in. Especially if you start by clicking a note. If you start by clicking a measure and then pressing escape or selecting a bar line or a key signature or a rehearsal mark or anything but a note, it's a little better. So these are some little tricks for getting a little better performance out of it. It always fixes itself eventually and it always exports as expected. But anyhow, for now, I'm just going to go with the old Muse sounds. I mean, the old sound font. So let's hear it. So, fine melody, works well. So the next thing that I want to show you, I'm going to go ahead and close the mixer now. Notice everything has been set to MS Basic. So F10 will close the mixer. So the next thing that I'm going to do is use that copy and paste because the whole thing with this canon is whatever melody gets stated is going to then be repeated in turn by the other two violins. So each melody is going to show up first for violin 1 and then get played by violin 2 and then violin 3. So every time I enter a melody, I'm going to then select it, copy it. It's actually probably still in my clipboard from before, and then paste it into violin 2 2 measures later, and then paste it into violin 3 2 measures later. So every time I paste someone's melody into this score, I'm going to paste it 3 times. I'll paste it into violin 1 first, then 2 measures later into violin 2, and then 2 measures later into violin 3. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with someone else's melody. I'm going to take another quarter note melody. And so here's the thing where if I want to do this for real, I would want to choose a melody that I think works well with Graham's. And now it's going to get into some theory, but let's do it. Let's do it. So Graham's melody started with a D. Graham's melody started with a D and then had a B at the beginning of the second measure. I want to find someone else's melody that I think is going to harmonize with this one. I'm not sure that I'm going to use Graham's for this. If I can find 2 that I think harmonize really well, I'm going to use that. But if you think about Pachelbel's actual melody, it was basically this. It was F sharp up here, D, dun, 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 dun. And then it was the second melody that comes in, so we're going to hear them together later, is bum, 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 bum. Something like that. Do I have that right? You know, now I'm actually doubting myself. I feel like I should look at Pachelbel's original again to remind myself. And I'm going to cheat and find it here, find it online rather than try to open it in MuseScore because, oh, did I not save it myself online? Bummer. I was going to try to save my computer the strain of opening that melody up. I'm not going to worry about it right now. So what happens here is these melodies work well in thirds. I think you're right. I think it's the last note. You're absolutely right. I remember there was that one leap. So thank you. That's absolutely right, Gianna. So this guy's an E. That is true. So what's happening here is this melody is in thirds. Which is a really nice thing. And I made this in office hours yesterday. I was talking to someone who was talking about writing a 2-violin part for an arrangement. And I was saying that normally we like the 2 violins, even if there's other stuff going on, other violins, cello, no, not other violins, but even if there's other stuff going on in the arrangement, if you've got 2 violins working together, we like those 2 parts to sound good on their own. So working in thirds, like I actually have here, I'm playing this on my keyboard, those are all thirds, and then that is a sixth, right? The interval between the notes, a third or a sixth are the good intervals. Now, I'm not saying you can't have other intervals between the 2 voices. You absolutely can get way more into that when I look at this more tomorrow for the master class. But I will say that is what made this work so well, is that it works amazingly well to just do parallel thirds this whole way through. And he totally could have gone up to the A, but he chose to expand up to the E, you know, presumably so that gives him a little more flexibility in what his next note would be after that. So what I would love to do is find someone's melody that I think is going to harmonize well with that quarter note line. If I can't find 2 quarter note melodies that I think harmonize really well with each other, I'm going to write my own. All right, because I haven't contributed anything to this piece yet other than, you know, guidance. So if I were to want to write my own melody on this, because I think I'm going to right now, just to do that, I would have that melody. So I'm going to put that melody in the violin 1 part here, and I would want to think about where I want that melody to be. Now, normally, in normal arrangements, we would expect violin 1 to be higher than violin 2, and violin 2 to be higher than violin 3. But that's not actually how the Pachelbel canon works. The way it all works is because that high line gets passed on to violin 2, it's very often the case that violin 1 comes in below violin 2. But in this case, I have you know, if I want to go a third below that D, it puts me on a B, which is not really in the chord. So I'm not going to do that. If I wanted to go a sixth below the D, I would be on an F sharp. Well, that's outside the range of a violin. So I'm going to, if I were to write my own line, I would put it here. And now I'm going to hope that something resembling, like if I just went up to a G here, I would have a 7th chord here. Am I ready for a 7th chord that early in the piece? No, I'm not necessarily, but I would put up with it if I could then continue my line up in steps like this. But that doesn't actually work. This A would give me another 7th. So I know I'm going to need to adjust these pitches. So maybe this guy's a B, and maybe that guy's a C sharp, and that guy's an A. Let me turn down my volume a little bit more. So maybe this is my melody. No. Because now I've got a doubled octave in there. So yeah, I'm definitely getting. I told you I would be talking about theory some. Now I've got like parallel octaves in here, so I'm not a fan of this particular melody. So yeah, whatever. What this would make me like think about, well, is this the melody that I want to start with if I can't find an easy way to harmonize it? So I don't like I like that A just, no, I don't even like that A because it just gives me this kind of hollow sound. I like that third. I don't love that fourth. And then that A really has nowhere to go, because if it goes up to B, I create parallel octaves. If I come back down to F sharp, now I'm just doubling the other part. So it makes me not really like where I'm going with this at all. So these are absolutely the kinds of things that I would think about if I were writing this from scratch. I would want to pick a melody to start with that I could then harmonize with nicely. And there's a whole process for that I talk about in my counterpoint course. But I'm going to save further discussion of that until tomorrow. What I will just do is just get back to the copy and paste aspect of this as an exercise and pick someone else's melody and just paste it in there, whether it works great or not. So I'm going to take a look. So the one thing I am going to pay attention to is I know a good harmony note for that D, because what's going to happen is that D is now in violin 2, and violin 1 is going to enter with a new melody. So I want this new melody to be one that harmonizes well with that D. F sharp sounds great. So melodies that start with F sharp are going to be nice, but I also know that if I start with F sharp, I might well get myself into some trouble. So I'm going to also look at melodies that start with other pitches. So I'm just going to, what does Linda have? She has an A and then a C sharp, but she also has B at the beginning of her second measure, just like Graham does. So I feel like that's going to be a little too similar. So let's pick someone else's melody. Joanne's melody. Now hers is basically the Pachelbel melody, which is really, it starts with F sharp and then goes down, which is going to be kind of nice, but then it's the same here. So with 2 notes fixed, you've only got certain other notes, and actually only one other, because I want chord tones everywhere. I want chord tones everywhere. So from my quarter note passage. So really, with 2 notes fixed, I only have one other note to choose from. And so that's another way of looking at it is, what note would complete the chord if I wanted to not double anything? So if I wanted to not double anything, that's an actually cool way of looking at this for now. If I do that, that's going to mean an F sharp, and then the next chord should have a C sharp, and then the next chord should have a D, and then the next one should have a C sharp. I'm filling in the chord. Next note should have a D. Next note should have an F sharp. Next note should have a D. Next note should have an E. So that would fill in the chord. Do I love this as a melody? No, it looks boring as hell. But I'm going to play it anyhow. So here's the thing with this melody, is the melody is boring. If I just play that melody, that has like alto part written all over it, like in an SATB arrangement, and the alto part is just chosen to fill out the chord, or in a barbershop arrangement, typically it's the baritone part that's just chosen to fill in the chord, and it's boring and equal parts boring and weird. So this is not a great melody, but it does fill out the chord like perfectly. So it has that going for it. It does create parallel fifths though here. The C sharp going to the D. So, what this could tell me is that Graham's melody, as strong as it is maybe not the best choice to start with if it limits me too much in terms of what else can happen. But this is kind of the gold standard of how to harmonize Graham's melody if we need it to harmonize, if we want to fill the triad completely. Now, if we look at the original, though, it doesn't. It's got doubled notes, right? It's got the doubled root here, and it's got the doubled root here, and it's got a doubled root here, and it's got a doubled root here. So once we realize that doubled roots are going to be fine, then that kind of that gives me some more choices to play with. So that this is all stuff that I can be playing with if I want to be, writing my own melodies. But I don't want to write my own melodies except at the beginning. The beginning is the one place where I feel it's the most important to make these two parts work well together because they are so exposed, right? They are just those two parts and the cello. Once the whole piece gets underway, these little subtle details of which note did I double, I won't care so much. Or is this melody a little dull? I won't care nearly as much. Once I've got all three parts going and I've got eighth notes going and I got 16th notes going, you can get away with a ton. But getting that beginning to sound anywhere near as well as Pachelbel's does is going to be a trick. Because as I said, he took the best melodies already. Not just because they're good melodies, but because they worked so well together in thirds. So I might have to do some, finagling to get it to all work. So what I'm going to do though is I'm going to, scrap my melody here again and go back to just copying someone else's that I think is going to work well. So I'm just going to keep looking at other people's eighth, because I do want it to be another quarter note melody, because that is how the Pachelbel started. So here's one that starts with the F sharp, and it also goes to a B. I want to avoid going to a B in the second measure, simply because Graham's is doing that. And at some point, I'll just say, well, Graham, we're going to not use your melody. Boy, everyone's going for a B in that second measure, which makes sense. It's the third of the chord. It's a great note to go for. Everyone's going to want that same B. Everyone's going to want that same B because it's the third of that chord. And Heist cheats a little bit and gives me the B with some 16th notes. That might be the trick right there. That might actually be the winner. To just let some 16th notes come in. How about Rod? Now Rod's got a melody that's sufficiently different that I'm going to use it. All right. So I'm going to use it so I can show you a couple things. I'm going to copy and paste those two measures. So first I'm going to do it by copying it and then coming over to the actual group version and pasting it in to the proper spot. Control V. Now, when I did that, notice it picked up the dynamic marking and the chord symbols. I'm going to first show you how to delete it, and then maybe we'll talk about how to not get it to do that in the first place. So I'm going to select that chord, click it, shift click that last chord, and press delete. And now those chord symbols are gone. Now I can click that dynamic and delete it. So that works just fine. You can delete things that way. But I'm going to go ahead and undo all that business. I'm going to save my score while I'm thinking of it also. Haven't done that in a minute. This time, I'm going to use the selection filter so you can see how that works. I want to say just copy the notes. Don't even copy the dynamics or the chord symbols. To do that, I'm going to go to View, Selection Filter. And here, now I can turn off dynamics and chord symbols. In fact, I could turn off other text also, just in case anyone has any of those in. Hopefully no one really has any of this other business in there. But now, when I copy this and paste into here, notice that stuff is gone, right? So now I can do what I said I was going to do of paste 3 times. So I pasted it here into the violin 1 part, 2 measures later, paste into violin 2, 2 measures later, paste into violin 3. And that's going to be my process. The next thing that I'm going to need is an 8th note line to come in next. And so I'll just randomly pick someone's 8th note line. And yeah, I'm gonna Heis is like, getting all nice and musical on me with occasional little 16th notes in there. I'm gonna go with it. Well, actually, what I do want to do is look at now the completion of the chord. Because we've got 2 Ds and an F sharp, I kind of would like to pick someone's 8th note line that starts with an A. So I'm going to look for people's 8th note lines and find one that starts with an A. And here we go, Rod's does. So I'm going to select these 2 measures. And again, I've still got the filter turned off. So I can select. Although I did just use rods. I'm not going to use rods again. And I'm going to have to keep track of whose stuff I'm using when I do this and add text in it so I don't... looks like John starts on an F sharp. I want to find someone who starts right off on an A on their 8th note line. D. So, you know, I would totally be flipping around. And notice that as I'm flipping around, I'm using Alt-Tab. Maybe you recognize that that's what's going on. Here we go. This is one that's 8th notes. So 8th note starting on A. So I'll select that. The selection filter is going to be like separate per score. So I should really go to the selection filter every time I'm copying and pasting and remove chord symbols there, or I can just remove them all when I'm done. So let's come back to the canon, paste in my 8th notes, and then again, 2 measures later, paste it into voice 2, into violin 2, 2 measures later, paste it into violin 3. So this process that I'm going through of pasting, you know, copying from one score, pasting into this, and pasting it 3 times. That's what I'm going to be doing over and over here. And Shayana's saying that you wrote a canon with a ground bass like Pachelbels that's you know, not Pachelbel. And actually some of you may remember before we even had the community, when I was just doing the MuseScore cafes and really didn't have anything else going on, we did a project like that. We did one of these collaborative canons with a chord progression that I came up with myself just to not be Pachelbels. And so we did that, you know, 3 years ago at the outset of the coronavirus, and so it was called the Corona Canon. So and yeah, I had all the same issues that came up of like, oh, but this part doesn't work together with that part, even though we're all following the same chords, there's issues. I set up the kind of rules for putting this together in a way that I thought was going to make my job easier, but I knew still the quarter note one would be a biggest issue. So next, I would probably go with another 8th note line, because that's what Pachelbel does. There's 2 quarter note lines, and there's 2 8th note lines, then 16th note lines. So here's the next 8th note line, and because I've got an F sharp and an A, I feel like I'm ready for an 8th note line starting with a D. So here's one starting with a D. It's Linda's. So I'm going to select that, 2 measures, and paste them in here. And of course, when I do this for real, I will be looking and thinking harder, and I will write in everyone's names as I copy. Right, I'll write in the name. So again, I'm copying it 3 times: violin 1, violin 2, violin 3. Then I'm going to want a 16th note line. And again, I'm going to use the same trick of maybe preferring the note, you know, starting on the note that is missing from the chord. So here, the F sharp is missing at the beginning of this chord, and that definitely will bother me. Now, that, you know, I don't have to just focus on the first note. I could focus on other things, but first note's as good a note as any to focus on. So I want the violin, I want a 16th note line now that starts with an F sharp. And so again, flip through people's stuff here, and 16th note line that starts on F sharp. And who have I not used? Have I not used Heis's yet? But his uses not that. Joanne's 16th note line. Oh, Joanne, yeah, you had a nice 16th note line, although it was, yeah, I'm just going to go with this. It's a nice arpeggiated line, and nothing wrong with that. So Joanne's got a line here. Copy it. And come back over here and paste. And because she's got the chord symbols in there and I forgot to do the filter, well, I didn't forget, I just didn't bother. I'm just going to select those chords, delete them, and then reselect those 2 bars. Copy, and now do my paste 2 more times. I'm going to do this all day long, but give it more thought. I mean, I'm giving it a little bit of musical thought now, but not a ton. So I feel like, you you know, I want to hear what this sounds like. So you're not going to have to wait to hear what this sounds like. You are going to have to wait a little while to hear the finished product. So let me give you a little heads up, then I'll play this, and then we'll, you know, just talk a tiny bit more and then be done for the day. Today, I wanted to show the process here. Tomorrow, I'm going to get deeper into the theory, how I'm going to choose the lines. We've already looked at not everyone's, but we've looked at a bunch of people's lines in terms of the lines themselves, and they're all good, right? There's little tweaks of, oh, you could change this, you could change that, but whatever. They're fine lines. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk more about this process of how to choose lines that work well together. What does it mean for lines to work well together? Like I might look at particular places where two lines are just a little too similar to make me happy, or where they avoid, you know, the thirds too much, and I want to choose a line that does when one line does a third, I want the other one not to do the third of the chord, and then when one line doesn't do the third of the chord, I want another line to do the third of the chord, so the third is always present, right? These sorts of things, because the root's always covered by the bass or the cello, and the fifth, yeah, I don't care if that gets missed occasionally. So we're going to be going deeper into that tomorrow, and I'm going to continue this process of assembling, and then over the remainder of the week, I'm actually going to do the work, and next week you'll get to hear the final product. All right. Oh, does Joanne's go below the line? Go below register? You're absolutely right. That F sharp is not going to be playable, not without retuning your violin. So what I'm going to do is just cheat this guy. We're going to save the score again, just in case. And I'm just going to select that guy and change the pitch. So I see a B. She's arpeggiating the chord here, but I'm trying to get from a B to a D. I'm just going to change that to a C sharp, because now it's a passing tone. And same here, change this guy to a B. Now it's a passing tone. All right, I'm ready to hear it now. I'm not going to claim this is going to be great because I only gave a little bit of thought to the lines chosen, but I do want to hear it. Well, we'll just hear it with this playback. We'll get Muse Sounds involved later. So let's hear. See that? No third. And then I would need another melody. So there you go. So the thing is, it works, right? You do this, you're writing melodies over a static chord progression. It's going to work at some level. The question will be, like, I winced at this part here. So let me play just this measure here. You're not hearing violin one? I certainly am. That was the one with the eighth notes there. So what happens here in this measure, this is all fine. Right there, we have all three parts on the leading tone. That wasn't so good. So there's an audio issue where if you have the same sample, the same actual sound sample playing the same note at the same time, that kind of doubling will cause weird audio glitches. It's not a MuseScore thing, it's just a digital audio thing. But also, it is the leading tone. Tripling the leading tone, not good technique. So that will be one of the things that I will be looking out for, is making sure that making sure not to pick melodies that all do the leading tone at the same time, to try to balance that, because I can't obsess about every single doubling everywhere. But the things that jump out at me as being, ooh, I didn't like how that sounded, I think that was one of the biggest ones right there. That tripled leading tone just didn't do it for me, right? So I'm going to have to pay more attention to that tomorrow. Anyhow, that's been the process of assembling this, copying and pasting. And when I do this for real, I'm going to have to be careful to attribute everyone's stuff and put in staff text to do this, or go back and figure it out later. But anyhow, I'm glad that people are finding this interesting and useful. And yeah, it's one of those ones that ties together music discussion as well as MuseScore discussion. So I kind of thought it would be kind of interesting. So there you go. That's the show for today. Let's get back to the actual MuseScore Café theme, even though it's, totally out of character with what we've just been listening to. So this has been Marc Sabatella with the MuseScore Café. And next week is the first week of next month, so it'll be an Ask Me Anything session. Tomorrow, I will be just basically continuing with what I did today. We've seen the MuseScore-isms, but we'll mostly be talking about the theory stuff. And, there might be a MuseScore-ism that comes up along the way, just like the theory things came up along the way today. So I think of today and tomorrow as kind of a pair. So I thank everyone again for all the submissions. It's been a really interesting project and a good way to wrap up what we've been doing in the course. And so look forward to talking more about it tomorrow. And then next month, I've got kind of another project for us to get involved with, those of you who want to continue with that sort of thing. So I'll talk about that also next week some, so you'll get to see what that's like and how that's going to work. And but yeah, next week I will premiere the actual finished recording here, and I think you'll find that really interesting too. So thanks everyone again, and hope to see most of you tomorrow as well. Okay, goodbye.